What's up, family? What's up? What's up? What's up? Welcome back to another video. So, we got a lot to unpack. After the Indiana Fever's tough loss to the Washington Mystics in Baltimore, and it was one of those games where everything that could go wrong pretty much did, especially with Caitlin Clark out of the lineup. Indiana struggled mightily to find offensive rhythm, and the defensive breakdowns kept piling up. Stephanie White, the Fever head's coach, spoke to the media post game, and we'll get to that clip in a minute of her post game um, conference, press conference. And let's just say she didn't hold back. She confirmed that she'd been fined by the WNBA, likely due to her previous comments regarding officiating after their loss to the New York Liberty. And while she didn't go off this time, she definitely hinted at her frustrations with how games are being called. So now, for the Fever fans out there and the WNBA fans in its entirety, for whatever team you are a support of or a fan of, now we can't be called as crazy anymore, right? Because we have been saying constantly that these referees has been doing some sus stuff when it comes to not officiating effectively and being efficient when it comes to refereeing these games. But even to have Stephanie White, the coach of the Indiana Fever, who's a phenomenal team. She has a superstar on her team, a superstar that changed the trajectory of the whole WNBA within a year, is coming out and saying the same thing we all been saying for the last 2 years since Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese came into this league as rookies. And really, Caitlin Clark shook things up, being phenomenal as she is. And the new coach come in less than a year, and she's already fined for calling out what it is that we all been saying as fans. If that's not mind blowing to you, then I don't know what is. So, throughout the night, it was obvious that the Indiana lacked their usual flow. The absence of Clark meant fewer transition points, less ball movement, and limited rim running opportunities. And Stephanie White emphasized that Clark's impact goes far beyond shot making. She controls pace, facilitates early offense, and puts pressures on defenses just by being on the floor. Without her, the Fever relied too heavily on dribble handoffs and static on ball screens. The team struggled to get into their off ball actions, which Stephanie White says has an ongoing point of growth. When physicality increased, the Fever reverted to old habits like settling for jump shots, playing too much one on one, and ultimately abandoning their whole offensive identity, if you ask me. Defensively, it was a mixed bag. It was a mixed bag. There was flashes of solid team defense, but the inability to finish plays definitely hurt the Indiana Fever. Stephanie White pointed out that even when they executed well for 22 seconds, the last 2 seconds, those closing efforts on box outs, rebounds, or contests, they just wasn't there. And that's where the Mystics took advantage, if you ask me, especially with those second chance points. The Fever also committed unnecessary fouls, often already forcing Washington into difficult looks. And those mental laps those mental laps turned into easy free throws or resets for the Washington Mystics. And when you're not scoring efficiently on the other end, those mistakes become even more costly. So Aaliyah Boston, despite shooting an efficient 4 out of 5, didn't get nearly enough touches. White acknowledged that most of Boston's actions coming in the two-player game were coming come the actions come into the two-player game with Clark. And without that dynamic with Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark, Boston's role became harder to manage, basically. And the Mystics were smart. They rotated defenders on her, stayed physical, and made her work on both ends of the floor. So look, you got to give Stephanie White her credit here. She took accountability, saying that the coaching staff needs to do a better job of getting Aaliyah Boston into favorable spots, even without Clark facilitating. And when it comes to leadership, Stephanie White made it clear that this team isn't going to hide behind Caitlin Clark's absence. I mean, when you have no choice, you can't, but they shouldn't anyway. So they were built with debt. They were built with debt for a reason. We know that. They have Sydney Colson. They have some senior leadership within the team, and the group collectively has to step up. We all know that, not just with effort, but execution and focus. And yes, they look different without Clark's playmaking, but the breakdowns happening now were already creeping in, even when she was playing. So, and then later in the press conference or the post press conference, she was asked about the level of physicality in the league and whether the WNBA should be doing more to protect star players like Caitlin Clark. And she was candid but fair, saying she doesn't think the game is dirtier than usual, but that the officiating does need more consistency. And like I said in the beginning, all of us fans have been saying that. Just be more consistent. So look, like airborne shooters on the perimeter often get more protection than players near the rim. That's wild. And called on the league to define what kind of game it wants, like a free throwing offensive league or a grinded out physical one, right? Either is fine, but they can't keep switching the standard. The standard is the standard. So, and the best moment of the night was when Caitlin Clark came from Caitlin Clark herself. Even though she wasn't playing, she spent over 12 minutes before tip off signing autographs for fans across the full length of the court. Um, and that was amazing within itself. So, with that being said, I want you guys to see the proof, and not just take it from me, that Stephanie White was actually fined from the WNBA when it came to her comments about the referee. So it says, and this is from Scott Agnes. He's a credible resource or credible source when it comes to reporting on the WNBA. And he said, Fever coach Stephanie White says she did get fined. She did just get fined by the WNBA, presumably for her post-game comments after their loss to the New York Liberty. That's wild. That's wild. And it also shows that the Indiana, I mean, not the Indiana Fever, the WNBA, the franchise as a whole, doesn't care. They're going to do what they want to do, and you're either going to fall in line or you're going to get in trouble. And someone says she got fined for speaking the truth. It seems to have made a difference. The refs were consistent in calls all night. And sometimes that's what it takes, family. You call something out, and then people want to hurry up and get their act together. But it's better to call it out than sit there and not call it out, because it's not fair to any of the players. It's not just the Indiana Fever players, all the teams throughout the league and the franchise. But let's check out what Stephanie White had to say within her post-game interview. Post-game conference. Check it out.
Kind of, Kelsey described this game as, getting punched in the mouth. Just what did you see from your vantage point on the sidelines?
Yeah, certainly, Washington's a good team, and they've had the lead in the fourth quarter in almost every game that they've played. They play hard. They're selfless. They move the ball. They cut hard. They play well together, and they kept coming at us. And at times we had breakdowns on the defensive end in our coverages. Their physicality, I felt like, on their defensive end against us took us out of our flow, particularly in the second half.
And obviously, you guys needed to adjust without Caitlin too. Is there anything you could pinpoint with the offensive issues today?
Yeah, certainly, not having any points in transition, is one that's obvious. Caitlin is really good at finding rim runners, getting the ball up the floor. That's one. We got to be better there. Not relying so heavily on dribble handoffs and on-ball screens. And I know we talked about this pregame, feeling comfortable getting to our off-ball actions. That's still a growth process for us and a growth edge for us. You can see when physicality happens or defensive pressure picks up, it's like we revert to some old habits, settling for one-on-one, settling for jump shots, settling for dribble handoffs, instead of trusting the process of moving the ball and of playing in some off-ball actions. And, on nights that we don't hit shots and we struggled from the floor, and you got to give their defense a lot of credit for that. They kept us uncomfortable. They kept pressuring us. We've got to be able to rely on our defense. And there were times where it was really good. And there are times where it was really good and then we didn't finish the play and we gave up an offensive rebound, or we were really good for, 22 seconds and not in the last 2 seconds. But it takes being really good all the time, and it takes finishing plays.
Yeah, Aaliyah was 4 or 5 too, but she seemed to not get as many touches as she usually did. Was that defense from the Mystics, kind of Caitlin not being out there as well, or just how can you get her more involved?
Yeah, I think probably a combination. Certainly she gets so many of her touches in the two-man game with Caitlin on the floor, and it looks different now without Caitlin on the floor. Making it a point of contention to get her touches on the block as much as in the two-man. I thought they did a really good job of changing bodies every couple of minutes and being physical with her and forcing her to defend on the other end as well with their post players. And we've got to be better as coaches of trying to get her in positions to be successful.
Steph, when the players were here, they had this kind of attitude of, we're not going to use Caitlin's absence as an excuse for some of the breakdowns that happened on both ends of the floor. Is that the sense that you got to, or kind of what you tried to instill in them of the fact that these are issues that, regardless of whether or not she's on the floor, need to be cleaned up, or have been issues even when she was playing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have a deep team for a reason. We added quality depth in the off season, and our ability to collectively step up and give a little bit more has to be there. Certainly, we're going to look different. With not just what Caitlin brings from a straight shot making standpoint, but facilitating standpoint as well. Our pace was different without her on the floor. I mean, there are so many things that she does outside of the obvious for our team, but. And as I said before, it is an opportunity for us to grow. And the defensive miscues, the defensive breakdowns, the fouling, unnecessarily. I felt like there were too many fouls at times where we were forcing Washington to hit tough shots. And we've got to live with them making tough shots. They're pros, right? But what we don't want to do is compound that by fouling or breaking down when we get a good defensive stop and giving up, offensive rebound putbacks, taking bad shots that lead to runouts. I'd venture to say I can't remember how many fast break points they had, but I'll bet they got 4 to 5 layups just on our poor shot selection. Those things have to get better, and they have to get better every game. And I feel like we've been a little bit stagnant in our growth area in those.
How would you describe the impact of Sykes on both ends tonight?
I mean, Sykes is just a player. I mean, she's tough. She's got a good feel for the game. She understands, when to attack, how to attack, the way she gets downhill. She's got a toughness about her on the defensive end of the floor. She's a really great leader for this young ball club, and they play like she plays, with that toughness, with that swag. And she's been a huge impact for them.
All right, family. I'm gonna leave it there, but I do agree with Stephanie White when it comes to the whole mantras. Defense wins games. Like, look, no matter how much talent, no matter how talented or flashy your offense is, strong, consistent defense is what gives you a chance to win, especially in close or high pressure games, right? Because if stops equals opportunities, every time your defense forces a stop, you're giving a team a chance to score, and you control momentum. Um, then defense is effort based, right? So unlike offense, which can be streaky or reliant on shooting percentages, defense is about discipline, hustle, and teamwork, and it's more consistent and controllable. And good defense shows up even when shots don't fall. Remember, she just said even when her shots wasn't falling, they still should have been doing good on the defensive end. Because on cold shooter nights, defense keeps you competitive, right? And championships are won on that end because, let's say, for example, in the playoffs, when play slows down, when pace slows down, and scouting titans and elite defenses consistently outperform elite offenses. Just look at any title winning team, their defense won the game. And I give you an example. Let's say a team dropped 110, right? 110 points. But if they give up 115, that firepower means nothing. Meanwhile, a team scoring 85 can still win if they hold their opponent to 80. So in short, offense might win you fans, but defense wins you games. Um and also she had mentioned about them having to being able to be efficient even when Caitlin Clark isn't on the floor. So that reminded me of that phrase, what you know now is better than what you don't know, right? Because in basketball, IQ wise, you got to stick to your scrims, trust your system, like she said, and don't gamble on unproven stuff in key moments. So, like, let me put it in context. If you scouted a team and know their tendencies, use that knowledge instead of guessing or over adjusting. Some people just be thinking too much, right? And if your defensive scheme has been working, don't abandon it to chase something you think might work better. And if your players are confident in a set play, run that play. Don't overcomplicate the game with new strategies you haven't practiced under pressure. So in high stake games, right, tight fourth quarters, playoff series, pressure moments, coaches and players are often get tempted to make bold changes. But look, execution beats invention if the invention is improving, you know? So it's about discipline over desperation. It's that simple from a coaching perspective, right? And I believe that's what she's standing on. She's phenomenal, the way she's able to articulate herself and really break down the strengths and weaknesses of her team and just keeping it real, right? She knows what she's up against. And you could tell her being a player and being on the floor and all the knowledge that she have learned and her experiences of playing basketball and it now um, correlates also to her coaching experiences she have, right? So this ain't nothing she haven't been through before. If anything, it's just another challenge in a different time and a different era, which will make not only Stephanie White great again, but the Indiana Fever as a whole. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below about this whole thing. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and got some value from this video. Give this video a big thumbs up. It helps crush that YouTube algorithm and push this video out. But no further ado, family. As always, spread that peace, love, and positivity. Peace.